Welcome to the second video in our tutorial series about the level editor for the Riftbreaker. In this part, we will tell you how to add props to the scene and how to apply textures to the ground. For both of these operations, we are going to need the tools available to us on the left-hand side of the window. They allow us to control the scene, the prefabs, the terrain, and the biome settings. We are going to take a look at each of these tabs individually. The first one is the Scene tab. When you first open it, you are going to see pretty much the same file structure as in the Workspace editor. It's a list of all the folders that contain entities that can be placed on a scene in the level editor. This list is auto-generated and fully dynamic. If you create your own entities that could be placed on the scene, the game will automatically find them and put them on the list for you. Feel free to explore all the different categories on your own. However, for this video, we are going to focus on the props folder. It contains all the decorative elements that we used to create levels for the Riftbreaker. Crystals, rocks, trees, grass, and many more. Select any of the items from the list by clicking the left mouse button and then clicking again in the viewport of the level editor. You will place that prop directly onto the scene at the point where the mouse cursor detects a collision with the ground. Use the select, move, rotate, and scale features that we discussed in the previous video to manipulate the objects that you put on the scene. They are available under the hotkeys Q, W, E, and R. You can try building complex shapes from simple props. It is not an issue if props collide with each other. In this example, we used a couple of types of boulders to create a bigger, more complex rock formation. You can experiment with joining props from different categories with each other. Use crystals, mushrooms, and pieces of vegetation to create more interesting scenery for your tile. Most props are subdivided into categories by size. Use pieces of different sizes to add detail to your level. Adding a couple of piles of debris around a large rock formation can go a long way towards making it more lifelike. If you want to use several copies of the same prop, use copy and paste function. Props that you place on the scene this way will not undergo any kind of randomization. Thanks to this, you can set up the basic geometry for your tile. If you want the tile to feel a little more claustrophobic, then of course add more props. But if you intend your players to build your base on your new tile, then make sure they have enough open space to do so. The only limit when it comes to prop placement is your creativity. Experiment with different setups, scales, rotations. You might find some pretty interesting combinations of props. Remember that using larger props affects the player and creature's movement. It's also important to place smaller props on your scene. Let's try creating a natural-looking field of grass. Pick one of the available grass models from the selector, place it onto your scene, and then copy and paste it a few times. Try adding bigger and smaller tufts to give it more flavor. It might not look great out of the box, but we have some tools to help you with that. Use click and drag to select all the props that you have just placed. Open the context menu using the right mouse button. There, you will find some randomization options. Let's pick randomize orientation for now. The editor will ask you about the possible range of angles that you would like to use. By default, it is 360 degrees. But you can limit it to your liking. Once you click OK, the editor will apply a random degree of rotation to all the selected objects. You can try it a few times until you get the result that you are satisfied with. We can then copy our little lawn to other areas of the map. You can either use the copy and paste function, or you can select all the entities and clone them using Shift and Move function. If you decide that you have overdone it a little bit with the number of props, we have a simple solution to help you with that as well. Select one prop that you feel you have too many copies of and press Ctrl and A to select all props of the same kind. Then press the right mouse button to bring up the context menu. You will find the option to remove the entities by certain percentage. For example, if you want to get rid of half of the instances of all the props of this kind, type in 50%. If you want to thin out your fields just a little, then type in 10% or any other value that would satisfy you. The editor will randomly select the exact percentage of props that you have chosen and then remove them. Now that we have added some basic props to our level, let's talk about the terrain options. The terrain menu is available on the left-hand side of the level editor window. It allows you to control the shape of the terrain as well as the textures. There are a couple of modes available in the terrain tool, so let's go over them one by one. The height mode allows you to elevate or lower the ground. Click and hold the left mouse button to raise the terrain. Click and hold the right mouse button to lower it. You can change the radius and strength of your brush to give you more control over what you're doing. A larger radius with lower strength will allow you to be more detailed with your operations. Since terrain level changes do not generally play well with the navigation in the Riftbreaker, we opt away from using these. Use the height tool to introduce gradual level changes in the areas that are outside of players' and creatures' reach. In order to create cliffs or canyons, we more often use the level feature. The level mode works similarly to the height mode. Press the left mouse button to elevate the terrain and the right mouse button to lower it. The key difference is that the level tool will only raise the terrain or lower the terrain to the exact level that you specified. Another cool feature of this tool is height probing. Hover your mouse over the elevated terrain, click your mouse and drag. The tool will automatically elevate the terrain to the exact level where you first clicked your mouse. You can also use this to flatten the surface of your map. Simply click on the ground level and then drag your mouse. Using the level tool, it's very easy to create cliffs and canyons to modify the look of your map. When you do create cliffs and canyons, it's generally a good idea to use some props to hide the sudden elevation change. There are a couple of sets of cliff rocks in the game that will help you do exactly that. Combine different models, add some debris, and you'll have a natural looking mountain in no time. Remember to try out different settings of orientation and scale of the props that you want to use. Use the perspective camera to make sure that there are no holes and that you are satisfied with the results. If you want to check what your new rock formation is going to look like in the game, then switch to game camera by pressing the G button. Now it is time to talk about textures. When we first created this style, we had to choose the biome. The choice of the biome is very important because it will affect the range of textures available for us to use. As you probably have noticed by now, the ground of this level is covered by this gray and green checkerboard. This is what we call a texture mask. This mask tells the level editor which area it should cover with the base texture of the biome. Each biome has 3 base textures. You can see them in the blend mode of the terrain tool. For simplicity's sake, we will just call them green, purple and red for now. You can paint with these texture masks on any part of the terrain you are currently editing. Remember to use your radius and strength settings to make changes between textures more gradual. What is important to note here is that if you are using a texture mask, you are not applying any particular texture to your level. You are only signifying which area the game should cover with a texture during the randomization process. The green, orange and purple masks all have different sets of textures that the game will be able to choose from during randomization. You can check the pool of available textures by clicking the little arrow key next to a texture mask. That will present to you the list of available materials for that particular mask. You can preview any of them. However, you must remember that this texture will probably change during the randomization process. It's a good idea to use different texture masks to make some areas of your map stand out a little bit more. You can, for example, touch up the areas underneath the grass fields or rocks by using a different texture. If you want to make some areas even more unique, you can also apply custom textures by adding them to the texture pool. In order to do so, you must click the green plus button in the materials section of the terrain menu. That will allow you to choose from a list of all the materials available in the game. What is also important is that the textures you choose this way will not undergo randomization during level generation. So if you want to paint the area around the cliffs on your map with some particular texture, you can easily do so. At any point during applying the texture masks, you can always check how the textures will blend with each other by selecting different materials for different masks. In the next part of this video series, we are going to show you what kind of logic entities you need to place on your map. We will decide on player and creature spawn points, the resources, and everything else. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section of this video. See you in the next episode.